The room spun around me, the lights blurred, and every breath felt heavier than the last. I had only just finished dinner, yet it seemed as though something strange was crawling through my veins, pulling me down into darkness. My heart raced, my palms turned cold, and a terrifying thought pierced my mind. This wasn't ordinary dizziness. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. I clutched the edge of the table, fighting to stay upright, but my strength betrayed me. At that moment, a choice flashed across my mind. Collapse for real and risk whatever danger was coming, or fake my fall and discover the truth. I let my body go limp, my eyes fluttered shut, and silence swallowed the room. Every sound became sharper. Footsteps, whispers, and then the vibration of a phone on the table. My sister's voice came through the receiver, soft at first, then sharper, colder. "It's done," she said. My heart nearly exploded in my chest. Done. What had she done? Her words were laced with relief, almost excitement. "He's out cold. By morning, it'll all be over." The air froze inside me, but I didn't move, not even to breathe louder. I stayed perfectly still, every muscle aching to respond, every part of me screaming to open my eyes and confront her. But I couldn't, not yet. If my sister really had a hand in what was happening to me, then this was bigger than a moment of dizziness. This was betrayal, a kind I had never imagined possible. And so, lying there, I made a silent vow. I would find out the truth, no matter how deep it went, no matter how much it destroyed me. Because now, I wasn't just fighting for survival. I was fighting to uncover her secret. Dinner was always a quiet affair in our house, but that night the silence carried an unusual weight. The clink of my spoon against the plate seemed louder than usual, echoing off the walls like a warning I couldn't quite decipher. My sister moved around the table with a strange kind of energy, her smile too wide, her laughter a little too forced. I tried to brush it off, telling myself she was just in a good mood, maybe even relieved about something. But beneath her cheer, I sensed something unsettling. Halfway through the meal, I noticed it, a faint bitterness in the food. Nothing strong enough to spit out, just a strange aftertaste that didn't belong. I sipped water to wash it down, but within minutes, the world around me began to tilt. My vision blurred, the edges of the room softened like wet paint, and my head grew heavy. I reached for the table to steady myself, but my hand slipped, trembling as if my body was no longer my own. A wave of panic hit me. This wasn't the ordinary kind of dizziness I had sometimes felt after skipping meals or working too hard. This was different. My chest tightened, my pulse quickened, and a dark suspicion clawed at my mind. Something had been put in my food. I tried to stay calm, but my body was betraying me. I could feel myself slipping. That's when an idea, reckless and desperate, struck me. If I couldn't fight whatever was happening inside, maybe I could outsmart whoever was behind it. I let my body sag, closed my eyes, and allowed myself to fall forward, feigning unconsciousness. My head struck the floor with a dull thud, and pain shot through my temple, but I stayed perfectly still, barely breathing, forcing myself to play dead to the world. The silence that followed was sharp, almost deafening. For a moment, I thought my sister would rush to my side, panicked, maybe even guilty. But she didn't. Instead, I heard her chair scrape against the floor. She walked slowly around the table, her footsteps measured, almost hesitant. Then came the soft vibration of a phone on the table, followed by the sound of her voice. Low, controlled, but chillingly unfamiliar. "It's done," she whispered. "Yes, he's out cold. By morning, it'll all be over." I felt my stomach twist as if I had been struck with a knife. My own sister, my blood, was speaking as though I was nothing more than an obstacle, something to be removed. My heart pounded so violently I feared she might hear it echoing against the floorboards. She paused, listening to whoever was on the other end, then gave a short laugh. "Don't worry. He won't suspect a thing. I'll take care of the rest." Her words cut through me like shards of glass. I wanted to leap up to demand answers, to shake her and scream why. But I didn't. If she believed I was unconscious, I had the upper hand. I kept my breathing slow, shallow, fighting every instinct to move. Minutes crawled by like hours. She moved around the kitchen, humming softly, as though nothing had happened, as though she hadn't just spoken the words that shattered everything I thought I knew about her. The humming was the worst part. It was the same tune our mother used to sing when we were children, a song that had once made me feel safe. Now it made me sick. Eventually, her footsteps retreated toward the hallway. A door opened, closed. Silence. Only then did I dare to crack my eyes open, staring at the dim ceiling above me. I wanted it to be a dream, some cruel trick of exhaustion or an overactive imagination. But the ache in my head from the fall, the bitterness still lingering on my tongue, and the echo of her words left no room for doubt. I pushed myself up slowly, my limbs heavy and trembling. Every sound in the house seemed louder than usual. The ticking clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint creak of wood beneath my own feet. Fear gripped me like a vice, but alongside it came something else. Determination. If my sister had truly betrayed me, if she had truly plotted something against me, then I needed to know the whole truth. I moved quietly to my room, careful not to wake her. My thoughts raced as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Images of our childhood flashed in my mind. The time she stood up for me when I was bullied at school, the nights we stayed up whispering secrets, the promises we made to always have each other's backs. Had all of that been a lie? Or had something changed in her so completely that I no longer recognized her? Sleep never came. Instead, I lay in the darkness, the weight of her words pressing on my chest. By morning I resolved I would act. I didn't yet know how, but I couldn't simply confront her. If she was capable of poisoning me or whatever she had done, then she was capable of much worse. I had to be careful. I had to be smarter than her. When dawn finally crept through the curtains, I dragged myself out of bed, still weak, but steady enough to play my role. She greeted me with that same bright smile, asking if I felt better, her voice dripping with false concern. I nodded, forcing a smile, pretending I had no memory of the night before. Inside I was screaming, but on the surface I was calm. The day passed slowly, every moment thick with tension. She moved about the house as though nothing was wrong, but I noticed things I had never paid attention to before. The way she watched me eat, the way her eyes flickered to my glass of water, the way she seemed almost expectant. I pretended to eat little, feigning a poor appetite, and each time her smile faltered just slightly. By evening, when she announced she was heading to the market, I knew it was my chance. As soon as the door closed behind her, I went to her room. My hands shook as I searched through her drawers, my heart pounding with every second. At first, I found nothing but clothes, old photographs, and letters. But then, tucked in the back of the lowest drawer, I found it. A small bottle with traces of white powder clinging to the inside. I froze, staring at it, my mind reeling. I didn't need a laboratory test to understand what it meant. She had poisoned me. My own sister had tried to kill me. I slipped the bottle into my pocket, my throat dry, my breath shallow. Proof. This was proof. But proof of what? Of betrayal. Of greed. Of hatred. When she returned later, I was sitting in the living room, pretending to read. She didn't suspect a thing. She smiled, asked about dinner, and for the first time I couldn't even bring myself to answer. I only nodded, my eyes fixed on the pages of the book I wasn't really reading. Inside I was falling apart. That night, as I lay in bed with the bottle hidden under my pillow, I realized something terrifying. The person I had trusted most in this world was now my greatest enemy. And worse, she didn't even know that I knew. The morning after discovering the bottle, I woke with a strange heaviness in my chest. It wasn't just the lingering weakness from the dizziness. It was the weight of knowing my own sister wanted me gone. As I sat up in bed, the bottle hidden deep inside my pillowcase pressed against me like a reminder of the secret I now carried. My body still trembled slightly, but I forced myself to move slowly, carefully, as though I were recovering from a fainting spell. If she believed her plan had worked, I would remain a step ahead. That was my only advantage. When I walked into the kitchen, she was already there, humming cheerfully as if the previous night had never happened. The smell of tea and bread filled the air, but the sight of the food made my stomach twist. She turned with a wide smile, her eyes bright. "You're up early," she said, almost too brightly. "How are you feeling today?" "Better." Her voice carried the tone of concern, but I could hear the sharpness underneath, the eagerness for me to confirm her success. I rubbed my forehead, letting my shoulders slump. "Still a little weak," I murmured, lowering my gaze so she couldn't see the fire burning in my eyes. "But better than yesterday." "That's good," she said softly, setting a cup of tea before me. "You just need rest. Drink this, it will help." She pushed the cup closer. I stared at it, feeling the steam brush against my face, and wondered if she had slipped something inside again. My hands trembled deliberately as I lifted the cup, bringing it to my lips, but I only pretended to sip, letting the liquid barely touch my tongue before setting it down again. She watched closely. I could feel her eyes studying me, measuring my reaction. I forced myself to sigh, leaning back as if exhausted. "I'll lie down again after breakfast," I said. Her smile returned, almost satisfied, and she turned back to the stove. For a moment, anger burned so hot inside me I nearly slammed the cup to the floor and demanded answers. But the thought of her call, of the words, "By morning it'll all be over," replayed in my head like a warning bell. She wasn't acting alone. Someone else was involved, and if I revealed myself too soon, I would lose everything. As the day dragged on, I played my part. I moved slowly, walked carefully, and pretended to nap on the couch while she busied herself around the house. Whenever her back was turned, I watched her, memorizing every move, every glance, every small detail that might tell me more. Once, when she thought I was asleep, she took her phone into her room and shut the door. I heard her voice through the thin walls, low and urgent, but I couldn't make out the words. My pulse quickened. The man she had spoken to last night. Was she talking to him again? Later in the afternoon, when she left for the market as she often did, I seized the chance to search again. This time I didn't just look in her drawers. I checked the shelves, the cupboard, the small locked box she kept in the corner of her wardrobe. The key, I discovered, was hidden beneath her jewelry case. Inside the box, I found a stack of papers, receipts, and a small envelope of cash. But it wasn't the money that caught my attention. It was a crumpled document with my name printed on it. I unfolded it with trembling hands. It was a copy of our father's will. My breath caught as my eyes scanned the lines. Almost everything, our house, the land, the savings, was left in my name. She was given only a fraction. My throat tightened as realization dawned. This was why. Greed had taken root in her heart, strong enough to twist blood ties into hatred. She hadn't simply wanted me gone. She wanted everything to herself. The paper shook in my hands as I shoved it back inside the box, relocking it carefully before returning the key to its place. My chest burned with fury, but I forced myself to breathe. I couldn't let her know I had discovered her motive. Not yet. That evening, she returned carrying groceries, humming the same cheerful tune as before. I helped her put things away, my face a mask of calm though my hands wanted to tremble. She glanced at me once or twice, almost suspiciously, but then she smiled again, satisfied I was still under her control. When she offered me dinner later, I only picked at the food, pretending fatigue. Each bite was a test of will. I wanted to spit it out to accuse her, but I swallowed carefully, taking only enough to appear convincing, not enough to risk my life. When night fell, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling as shadows shifted across the walls. The bottle beneath my pillow and the copy of the will burned in my thoughts. My sister had become a stranger to me, a stranger who carried my blood but none of the love I thought we shared. The question that haunted me most wasn't why she wanted the inheritance. It was how she could do this to me. What darkness had taken hold of her that money meant more than family? Sometime past midnight, I heard her footsteps in the hallway. Soft, careful, like someone trying not to wake me. My body stiffened as I shut my eyes tight, feigning sleep. The door creaked open, and I could sense her standing there, watching. My skin prickled with fear, but I kept my breathing even. After a long pause, the door closed again, and her footsteps retreated. Only then did I allow myself to breathe fully. She was checking. She wanted to be sure I was still under her control. The next day, I knew I had to be bolder. If I stayed in the house pretending forever, I would eventually slip, and she would realize I was onto her. I needed proof, more than just a bottle and a will. I needed to know who the man was, the one she had spoken to on the phone. Without answers, I was only surviving, not winning. I waited until evening again, when she left for her usual errands. This time, instead of searching her room, I followed her. My heart pounded as I trailed at a distance, careful to stay hidden among the crowd. She walked quickly, glancing over her shoulder once or twice, her steps filled with purpose. The further she went, the more desolate the streets became, until she reached the edge of town where an old warehouse stood, half forgotten and covered in rust. I ducked behind a stack of crates and watched as she slipped inside. My breath came in short bursts as I crept closer, pressing my ear against the cold metal wall. Her voice echoed faintly from within. "He doesn't suspect anything," she said, her tone sharp, confident. "Yes, I've been careful. Soon it will be mine." A man's voice replied, deep and steady. "You'd better be right. We've waited long enough. Once it's done, there's no turning back." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just my sister's plan. Someone else was invested in it, someone dangerous enough that she sounded almost submissive in his presence. I pressed harder against the wall, straining to catch every word. "I'll finish it," she said firmly. "He's already weak. He won't last much longer." Every muscle in my body screamed at me to burst inside, to stop her, to demand answers. But reason held me back. If I showed myself now, it would be 2 against 1, and I didn't even know what they were capable of. Instead, I pulled back, my heart racing, and slipped into the shadows before she emerged again. By the time I returned home, I was shaking. My sister wasn't just greedy. She was dangerous, and she wasn't alone. Whatever she was planning, it was bigger than I had imagined. And I knew then that my battle had only just begun. When I returned from following my sister to the warehouse, the weight of what I had overheard pressed down on me so heavily I could barely stand. My legs trembled with each step, not only from the dizziness that still lingered inside me, but from the crushing truth that my own blood had joined hands with a stranger to destroy me. It wasn't only about inheritance anymore. The tone of that man's voice, the way he demanded results from her, told me this plan had been crafted carefully, deliberately, and for longer than I wanted to imagine. This wasn't a moment of greed. This was betrayal woven like a net, waiting to pull me under. By the time I entered the house, my sister was already back, smiling at me as though she hadn't just conspired against me minutes before. She was chopping vegetables, humming the same tune that now made my skin crawl. "You look tired," she said, her voice full of false sweetness. "You should rest. I'll bring dinner to your room." I nodded weakly, playing my role, hiding the rage boiling inside me. "Yes," I murmured. "Maybe I will." Then I climbed the stairs slowly, each step deliberate, pretending to be weaker than I truly was. I could feel her eyes following me, measuring every movement. In my room, I shut the door and leaned against it, my hands shaking. I could no longer ignore the truth. She wanted me dead, and soon. But fear was slowly turning into something else, a cold determination. If I wanted to survive, I needed more than suspicion. I needed undeniable proof, evidence that would expose not just her, but the man behind her as well. Until then, my silence was my greatest weapon. That night, I didn't eat the dinner she brought me. I waited until she left the tray and disappeared down the hall, then tipped the food into a bag and sealed it tightly. Maybe, just maybe, I could have it tested later. I hid the bag beneath the loose floorboard by my bed, next to the bottle of powder I had already found. Each piece was falling into place, but the puzzle wasn't complete yet. Sleep never came easily. Every creak of the house set my nerves on fire, and more than once, I thought I heard her standing outside my door, listening. I kept my breathing steady, forcing myself into stillness, because I knew if she suspected I was onto her, she would act faster, and I wasn't ready yet. My mind spun with plans, with what-ifs, with the thought of my father's will, the man's commanding voice, and the shadow of death hovering so close. Morning light crept through the window, and with it came the sharp pang of reality. My sister was already downstairs, moving about as though life was perfectly normal. She smiled when I entered, offered me breakfast, and asked how I was feeling. I told her I was still weak, that my stomach couldn't handle much, and I watched her carefully as her smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before she masked it again. That small hesitation told me everything. She was growing impatient. Throughout the day, I kept my routine slow, careful, and predictable. I let her believe I was fragile, vulnerable, and unaware. But in the quiet moments when she wasn't watching, I searched. I checked her phone whenever she left it unattended, scrolling through her messages with trembling fingers. Most were ordinary, harmless conversations with friends and neighbors, but there were a few numbers saved with no names, only digits. One thread in particular caught my attention. A series of short, sharp messages. "Is it done?" One read. "Not yet. Soon," she had replied. "Don't delay." The man had written back. My throat tightened as I took quick photos of the messages with my own phone. Proof. Not enough to convict, but enough to begin painting the picture of her betrayal. That evening, I watched her more closely than ever. She moved around the kitchen with unusual precision, measuring spices, tasting the broth, her eyes flicking toward me when she thought I wasn't looking. I knew then, with absolute certainty, that tonight she would try again. My stomach knotted at the thought of eating anything she placed before me, but I forced myself to sit at the table. When she served me the meal, her hands trembled ever so slightly, though her smile never wavered. "Eat," she urged. "You need your strength." I lifted my spoon, dipped it into the food, and raised it to my lips, but instead of swallowing, I let the liquid rest on my tongue for only a second before coughing, letting it spill back into the bowl. Her face changed instantly. For the first time, her mask cracked. "What's wrong?" she asked quickly, too quickly. "Nothing," I muttered weakly, clutching my stomach. "I don't feel well. Maybe later." Her eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering through them, but she forced a smile and nodded. "Of course. Rest. I'll save it for you." I excused myself and retreated to my room, my body shaking with the effort of keeping up the act. That bowl of food joined the bag beneath the floorboard, another piece of evidence, another step closer to the truth. Lying in bed, I thought of the man's voice again, deep and commanding, and I realized I couldn't wait much longer. If she sensed I was resisting, she would become desperate. Desperation made people reckless, and recklessness could kill me before I was ready. I needed to find out who that man was and what his connection to my sister truly meant. 2 nights later, the chance came. She told me she was going to visit a friend in town, her tone light, casual, but I knew where she was headed. I waited 10 minutes before following, my heart pounding as I slipped into the shadows once more. She didn't see me, too focused on reaching her destination. As I suspected, she made her way to the warehouse again. This time I dared to get closer. I crept along the side of the building, slipping through a broken panel until I found myself inside, hidden behind a stack of wooden crates. The voices were clearer now, echoing in the dim space. "He's still alive?" the man asked, his tone sharp with irritation. "Yes," my sister admitted, her voice low, hesitant. "But he's weak. It won't be long." "It had better not be," the man growled. "We can't afford mistakes. If he talks, everything we've built will crumble." My breath caught. Everything we've built. What were they hiding beyond this plan against me? "I'll handle it," my sister insisted, her tone more forceful now. "I know what I'm doing." "See that you do," the man said. "Because if you fail, you'll be the one to pay." The threat hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. I dared not move, dared not breathe too loudly. Slowly, I slipped back the way I had come, my mind racing with the implications. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about greed. There was something larger at play, something dangerous enough that even my sister seemed afraid of failing. Back in my room that night, I lay awake, staring into the darkness. The evidence was growing. The poisoned food, the bottle of powder, the will, the text messages, and now the conversation with a man. Piece by piece, the picture was forming. But the most terrifying part was that I still didn't know the full scope of their plan. All I knew for certain was that my time was running out. And as I closed my eyes, pretending once more to be weak and vulnerable, I made myself a promise. I would not fall. Not to her, not to him, not to whatever they had built together. I would expose them no matter what it cost me. Because family may have betrayed me, but I would not allow their darkness to become my end. The next morning came with a weight heavier than any before. I stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours, wondering how much longer I could keep up this game. My sister moved about the house as though nothing was wrong. Her voice cheerful when she greeted me. Her eyes carrying that same sharp gleam I had grown to recognize. She thought I was breaking. She thought her plan was working. And in that belief I had power. Still, every moment with her felt like walking a tightrope. If I slipped even once, if my eyes betrayed me, if my voice grew too steady, if she caught even a flicker of suspicion in me, it would all be over. So I made myself weaker than ever, shuffling slowly through the house, clutching my chest when I stood too quickly, pretending to nap at odd hours. I let her believe she was winning, even as I hid evidence piece by piece beneath the floorboard. The food I had refused, the bottle of powder, the photos of her messages. The collection grew, and with it, the fire inside me. But proof hidden under a bed would not save me. I needed something bigger, something undeniable, something that tied her not only to me but to the man who pushed her so hard. For days, I listened carefully to her phone calls, straining to catch a name, an address, anything. She was clever, though, never saying much, never using names. Each conversation was short, sharp, filled with half-sentences and unfinished thoughts. But I knew one thing. They were planning something soon. The urgency in her tone was growing. One evening I caught a break. She had gone into the kitchen to take a call, thinking I was asleep in the living room. My eyes remained half shut, my breathing slow, but my ears strained toward her voice. Yes, tomorrow night. He won't suspect, yes, I'll make sure. Her words were hushed but hurried, her footsteps pacing back and forth. My chest tightened as I realized she was setting a deadline. Tomorrow night. When she hung up and returned to check on me, I let my body remain still. She stood over me for a long time, her eyes narrowing slightly as though studying every detail of my face. My heart hammered so loudly I thought she might hear it. But eventually she walked away, satisfied. I waited until I heard her door close before I sat up, gasping silently for air. Tomorrow night. Whatever they had planned, it would happen then. That night I made my decision. Waiting passively was no longer an option. If I allowed her and that man to control the timing, I might not live long enough to expose them. I had to act first, but carefully. I pulled the floorboard loose and laid everything out before me. The bottle of powder, the sealed bags of food, the photos of her messages, and my phone with the recordings of her conversations. It wasn't complete yet, but it was enough to make someone listen, if I could survive long enough to show it. The problem was simple but terrifying. How could I get this evidence out without her noticing? Leaving the house without explanation would spark suspicion. If she caught me carrying anything, it could end right there. I had to be smarter. The next morning, I pretended to be even weaker than before. I told her I felt dizzy, that my chest hurt, that I couldn't stand for long. She fussed over me with fake concern, telling me to rest while she prepared food. I let her, watching from the corner of my eye as she sprinkled something into the soup, stirring it with that same false smile. I nearly laughed, bitterly, at how predictable she had become when she stepped outside to hang laundry. I slipped into her room again. This time, I wasn't looking for money or documents. I wanted something immediate, something that tied her directly to the man. Her phone was on the table, unlocked. My pulse raced as I scrolled through her recent calls. There it was, the number she had called last night, marked only with digits, no name. I copied it into my phone quickly, snapping photos of the call log. Then, just as I was sliding her phone back, I heard her footsteps in the hall. Panic shot through me. I lay down on her bed, pulling the blanket over me, and forced my breathing into a shallow rhythm. The door creaked open. She stood there, frowning. "What are you doing in here?" she asked. I let my eyes flutter open slowly, squinting as though half asleep. "I was dizzy," I whispered. "I couldn't make it back to my room." Her frown softened, but suspicion lingered in her gaze. She walked closer, brushing my forehead with her hand. "You're burning up," she murmured. "Rest here. I'll bring you something to drink." As she left, I nearly collapsed with relief. My act had saved me again, but only barely. I knew now that the walls were closing in. I had one day, one chance, before she tried again tomorrow night. That evening, when she served me dinner, I forced myself to act weaker than ever. I let the spoon fall from my hand, muttered that I had no appetite, and allowed her to lead me back to bed like a helpless child. Inside, though, my mind was racing. Tomorrow I would not be her victim. Tomorrow I would turn the trap on her. I lay awake through the night, every sound sharpening my nerves. I thought of our childhood again, of the girl who once laughed with me under the stars, who promised we would always protect each other. That girl was gone, replaced by someone whose heart had been hollowed out by greed and fear. It hurt more deeply than I wanted to admit, but anger kept me steady. She had chosen this path, not me. The next morning, she was brighter than ever, moving around the house with a lightness that made my stomach turn. She believed today would be the end, that tomorrow she would wake up to everything she wanted. Her humming was louder, her smile sharper. Watching her, I felt a strange mixture of disgust and sadness. I waited patiently, timing every move. When she left the house for her errands, I pulled out my phone and dialed the number I had copied from her call log. My hands shook as I pressed it to my ear. After 3 rings, a voice answered. "Who is this?" the man demanded. I froze, my throat dry. His voice was the same as in the warehouse. Deep, commanding, dangerous. "Just a wrong number," I stammered quickly, hanging up before he could say more. My chest heaved with adrenaline. It was reckless, but now I had something undeniable. Proof that the number existed, proof it was real. If I could connect him to my sister with the rest of the evidence, their web would collapse. By the time she returned, I was back in bed, pretending to be asleep. She peeked in, satisfied, and went about her evening routine. I closed my eyes, heart pounding with anticipation. Tomorrow night she thought she would end me. But tomorrow night I would be ready. I rehearsed every step in my head. I would record her, force her hand, let her reveal herself with her own words. And when she did, I would finally tear away the mask she had worn for so long. As darkness settled over the house, I realized I was no longer afraid. The fear had burned itself into something sharper. Resolve. My sister had made me her prey, but she had underestimated me. She thought I was weak, but weakness was the mask that would destroy her. Tomorrow her plan would fail. Tomorrow her lies would end. The final day arrived with a silence that pressed against my chest like a weight I could not shake. And yet I forced myself to rise with deliberate slowness, playing the part of the weak brother one last time. My sister was unusually cheerful that morning, her voice light, her footsteps quick as she moved about the house, humming as though the sun had risen just for her. I watched her through half-closed eyes, pretending to drift in and out of sleep, while inside my heart thudded like a drum because I knew that this was it. Tonight she would make her move, and tonight I would end her game. Every glance she threw at me carried both pity and calculation, as if she were already rehearsing how she would explain my collapse to the world. And the thought of it filled me with both fury and determination. For hours I said nothing, keeping my voice soft and weak when she spoke, answering her with half-smiles and groans, just enough to lull her into certainty that her poison had taken root deeply. She checked on me often, almost too often, and each time she pressed the back of her hand against my forehead. Her eyes glittered with that sharp, cruel satisfaction she no longer cared to hide. It was the longest day of my life, a day stretched thin with waiting, with my body still as stone but my mind a storm of plans and possibilities. When evening finally settled and shadows crawled across the walls, She called out that dinner was ready, her voice carrying an almost musical joy. I dragged my body to the table, every step heavy with pretense, every breath shallow, my shoulders hunched like a man moments from collapse. The food sat before me steaming gently, but I didn't touch it right away. I let my hand tremble, let the spoon clatter slightly against the bowl, and I saw the flicker of triumph pass across her face. She leaned in, her tone honeyed and falsely gentle, urging me to eat, to gather strength, pretending to be the doting sister while her eyes betrayed her hunger for what came next. I took one small sip, letting the warm liquid slide against my lips but not down my throat, instead holding it and letting it slip away when I lowered my head as though dizzy. She smiled then, a soft cruel curl of her mouth, certain that victory was finally in her grasp. That was when I set my trap in motion. I pushed back slightly, murmuring that I felt faint, and she rushed around the table with feigned concern, placing her hand on my shoulder. My phone, hidden under the table and already recording, caught every sound, every word, every tremor in her voice. I let my body slump forward, my breathing shallow, and whispered in a barely audible voice, "Why are you doing this?" Her fingers froze for a fraction of a second, but then she laughed softly, almost to herself, as though I had spoken nonsense. "Shoo," she cooed, brushing my hair back. "Just rest. Soon it will all be over." My heart clenched as the words came, cruel and careless, but it wasn't enough. I needed her to reveal more. I let my body shudder weakly, gasping out, "I heard the call last night." That broke her composure. She stiffened, eyes flashing, and for the first time her mask cracked fully. She leaned close to me, her voice a low hiss, the venom pouring out with every syllable. "You should have just eaten quietly and died like you were supposed to. Do you know how hard it is to carry you all these years? To watch you succeed while I was left behind. I gave you everything and you never gave back. But it's fine. Soon you'll be gone and I'll finally have the life I deserve." Her words spilled out, bitter and jagged, and I held still, letting the recording capture every poisonous truth. She confessed in fragments, her hatred, her greed, the man who had promised her escape if she delivered my fortune to him. Her lips twisted with anger as she called me weak, foolish, blind to her suffering, and in that moment I saw her not as my sister but as a stranger wearing her face. My stomach churned with a mix of sorrow and rage, but I kept my body limp, letting her believe I was already fading. When she stepped back to make the call to the man, her voice urgent as she whispered that tonight was the night, I quietly reached for my phone, ending the recording and sending it with shaking hands to a trusted friend I had prepared days before. The message was simple. If something happens to me, this is why. The evidence was gone from the house, beyond her reach, and a strange calm settled over me, for I knew even if I didn't survive this night, the truth would. But I had no intention of dying. When she returned, phone still in her hand, I let my body go slack as though unconscious. She hovered over me, satisfied, and whispered, "Finally," before stepping away to gather her things, no doubt preparing to meet him. That was my chance. With every ounce of strength I had hidden, I sat up suddenly, my voice firm for the first time in weeks. "It's over," I said, and the shock on her face was almost enough to undo me. She froze, eyes wide, the blood draining from her cheeks. "You," she stammered, backing away, but I stood, my legs shaking yet strong enough to carry me forward. "I know everything. The food, the poison, the calls. I recorded it all. It's already gone from here. Even if you kill me now, the world will know." Her mouth opened and closed like a trapped animal, her bravado collapsing as fear seeped into her eyes. She lunged at me, perhaps to snatch the phone, perhaps in blind desperation, but I was ready. I shoved her back, the months of weakness I had faked fueling me with a strength she had not expected. She fell against the table, dishes shattering around her, her voice breaking into a scream of rage. "You ruined everything," she cried, her face twisted with hatred. But even as she screamed, a knock thundered against the door, sharp and commanding. My friend had called the police with the evidence I sent, and now their voices echoed through the house, demanding entry. My sister's eyes darted wildly, her body trembling as the walls of her scheme crashed down around her. She tried to run, but it was too late. The door burst open, officers flooding in, their presence filling the room with authority and finality. I stepped back, letting them see her, the chaos of the broken dishes, the bowl of poisoned food still on the table. She screamed and fought, denying everything, but her words were empty against the weight of the recording, the photos, the bottle of powder hidden in her drawer. They restrained her, her voice breaking into sobs, but I could not tell if they were of guilt or simply the terror of being caught. I stood silent, my chest heaving, my heart torn in pieces as I watched my sister, the girl who once laughed with me in our youth, dragged away in chains. When the house grew quiet again, I sank into a chair, my body finally giving in to the exhaustion I had carried for weeks. The officers spoke to me, their voices calm, assuring me that justice would be served, but their words washed over me like distant echoes. All I could see was her face, not the twisted mask of rage she had worn tonight, but the innocent smile of years long gone, when betrayal was unthinkable. A hollow ache spread through me, deeper than victory, deeper than relief. It was grief, raw and heavy. I had survived, yes, and I had destroyed her plan, but I had also lost her forever. As dawn broke the next morning, painting the world in pale light, I stood at the window and let the silence of the empty house settle around me. I was alive, free of her shadow, my name cleared, my fortune safe. Yet the cost lingered, etched into my bones. The knowledge that the person I trusted most had chosen my end, and that I had been forced to end her instead. Some victories taste of ash, and this was one of them. Still, as the sun rose higher, I told myself quietly, firmly, that survival was its own kind of triumph. And with that, I turned from the window, ready at last to begin again, carrying both the scars of betrayal and the strength of survival into whatever waited beyond. Backhand index pointing right if you enjoyed this story. Don't forget to like, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Backhand index pointing right. Subscribe to Twisted Fate Chronicle for more shocking twists and unforgettable stories.